Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking a highly revealing piece of recent political media, One Nation leader Pauline Hanson's appearance on Sky News. We are going to objectively and meticulously break down her economic claims, her intense rhetorical framing, her critiques of the political right, and her surprising ambitions for the highest office in the country.
Okay, let's dive into this. We've got four main things on the agenda today. First, the budget critique. Second, ideological labels. Third, evaluating the coalition. And fourth, a possible run for prime minister.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the budget critique and economic grievances.
So the whole catalyst for this interview is the Albanese government's recent federal budget. And to really understand Hanson's argument, you have to look at her emotive language. She states, quote, "He's just kicked them in the guts with this." She's talking directly about the budget's impact on the aspirations of young Australians. According to Hanson, this budget severely penalises young people who are just trying to get a foothold in the property market through investment homes, or even those trying to build wealth in the stock market. She basically paints a picture of a generation having the ladder completely pulled up from under them. Hanson is essentially arguing that two very distinct groups are being targeted here. On one hand, you've got young investors who, as she claims, are now unable to buy investment properties to eventually secure their own homes, or are just totally locked out of the stock market. But on the flip side, she points to older savers, basically her own generation. She argues that these are people who lived frugally, bought secondhand items and saved meticulously to acquire investment properties. And why? To fund their retirement so they wouldn't be a burden on the state. Hanson's stated outcome here is that the current government is stripping away this accumulated wealth purely to pay for over-the-top government spending. Moving right along to Section 2, ideological labels and rhetorical framing. Now, what's really interesting here is how the interview shifts gears. As it progresses, the focus moves away from the nitty-gritty of economic policy and straight into some seriously intense, highly polarized labeling. Hanson doesn't just disagree with the budget, she flat-out brands the current government as socialist, communist, Marxist. We're looking at this neutrally just to understand her framing. She characterizes the government's approach as taking wealth away from those who are inspirational and want to get ahead, and dispersing it to those who, in her exact words, want to do absolutely nothing. And the host, Rowan Dean, he actively agrees with and encourages this language, asserting it's just Socialism 101. Throughout the chat, Hanson and Dean construct this really stark contrast. On one side, you have what they call the inspirational wealth generators, representing independence, personal savings, capitalism, and the self-made individual. On the other side, they describe a system of government socialism. They claim that universities absolutely hate capitalism, and that the ultimate goal of the current government is to make everyone beholden to them for jobs, childcare, literally their entire future. It's a very clear us versus them rhetorical structure, totally designed to maximize ideological contrast. Let's pivot to Section 3, evaluating the coalition and One Nation versus moderates. Here's where she turns her sights onto the political right, focusing heavily on shadow treasurer Angus Taylor. She makes a pretty bold claim here. She says the coalition is actively co-opting One Nation's platform. Following what she calls a wake-up call for the coalition at the Fadden by-election, she claims Taylor has suddenly started adopting her policies. The two specific examples she throws out, knocking back immigration and instituting an 8-year waiting period before migrants can receive citizenship. But she totally dismisses Taylor's recent speech as uninspired, calling his points mere motherhood statements.
To put that into perspective, let's talk numbers. 130,000. That is the exact, concrete annual immigration cap that Hanson has publicly advocated for, which she argues will project rural and regional jobs. Her big critique of Angus Taylor is that while he talks a big game about cutting immigration, he fundamentally fails to put a hard number on it. To her, without a specific figure, the policy completely lacks teeth. I mean, in political strategy, hard numbers mean hard accountability, and that is exactly what she's weaponizing against Taylor here.
And that gets to the core difference Hanson sees between herself and Angus Taylor. She argues that she has the singular determination to actually execute and carry these policies all the way through to the end. Taylor, on the other hand, she paints as being totally hamstrung and blocked by moderate coalition MPs. According to Hanson, these moderates are far too focused on issues like climate change, gender dysphoria, and what she broadly labels wokeness, which she says prevents the coalition from taking any hardline stances.
Finally, we hit Section 4, a run for prime minister and future political strategy.
This is where the interview takes a super fascinating turn toward One Nation's ultimate goals. Rowan Dean looks right at her and asks the million-dollar question, can One Nation form a government, and could Pauline Hanson be the Prime Minister of Australia? What's amazing from an analytical standpoint is that she doesn't deflect.
not even a little bit. She expresses this surprising openness to the idea, making it crystal clear that she believes one nation absolutely can form a government if it's the will of the people.
She even goes so far as to outline the logistical steps she's actively contemplating closer to the next election to achieve this unprecedented goal. Step 1, she acknowledges she'd need to make the massive tactical move from the Senate, the upper house, down to the lower house. Step 2, she discusses a scenario where she would demand supply and confidence guarantees from the coalition in exchange for her support. And the ultimate third step, working together to completely oust what she calls the Labour-Greens-Teal government.
But she knows there are roadblocks to this plan. She specifically calls out coalition figures like Tim Wilson, Jane Hume, and Dave Sharma as moderate stumbling blocks. She refers to them as Labour lights or Greens and complains of a deafening silence from them whenever she offers cooperation. She highlights these massive policy chasms between them, specifically noting her absolutely non-negotiable demand to exit the Paris Agreement, which she knows moderates are not going to easily swallow.
And this brilliantly illustrates her final position in the interview. She states, and I quote, "I'm going for government, and if it happens that I need to be Prime Minister of this country, Rowan, I'm going to go for it." Talk about a definitive concluding statement, right? She is essentially putting the coalition on notice that she's no longer content to just prop them up. She genuinely believes she has the policies and the determination to lead in her own right.
So what does this all mean? It leaves us with one crucial question to end our explainer today. How will this rhetoric shift the dynamics of the next Australian election? By openly floating a run for the lower house and the prime ministership while simultaneously attacking the moderate wing of the coalition, Hanson is signaling a deeply aggressive political strategy. Will this friction end up fracturing the Conservative vote, or will it pressure the coalition further to the right? It's a massive political chess game, and we'll all be watching it closely. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, stay focused, and I'll catch you next time.